join us for another episode of Man Code, where real men have real conversations about leadership, relationship, morality, and dominion. Welcome to Man Code.
Hey viewing audience, my name is Jonathan Russell, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Man Code Conversation.
Now look, let's go back. Let's take the Greenwood District, HBCUs, all of our Black fraternities and sororities, all of our different Black church denominations, and all the business associations that were formed because of segregation. Now, in modern culture, with the way we have everything integrated, with the way things are going, moving forward in the world, do we still have a need to be exclusively Black? Because you have to ask yourself, were we ever originally anyway?
I'm sorry, your last point of that was, do we need to be exclusive to
Do
Black?
we still need to be, you're right. I mean, as far as like our HBCUs and our business associations, our churches, do we still have that need? I'm saying before it was a need. I understand where I'm going with this. We had a need because otherwise you just without. But in today's standard, is there a need?
I'll jump
I'm
in on
going to
this.
reserve unless somebody else says something.
I think we still have a need to continue to identify, because I still want to go in retrospect to what we spoke on earlier. It's just been a short bit of time. That blueprint or footprint, however you want to term it, has not been really established just yet, So until that happens, until we're really recognized as being a people of color and respected in that sense, I think we need to have our own, so to speak. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because the reality is, if you think about a lot of advances and movements in modern day, like the 2000s era, the people that are bringing that conversation forth is us, right? So if we're not advocating for ourselves, then it's kind of like, who's going to advocate for us? Like I'll give a personal example. So in Grand Rapids, last year? 2 years, yeah, last year, a young man from Congo shot and killed by a police officer, and this young man was a member of his family was a member of a predominantly white church in Grand Rapids. Like I said before, Attorney Ben Crump, City Commissioner Robert Womack is his name. Al Sharpton even reached out to that family's local church, which was a predominantly white church, and said, Al Sharpton, police brutality, we don't want anything to do with it. They reached out to several white churches in the city of Grand Rapids, and none of them wanted anything to do with it. Well, they reached out to my father, and my dad prayed on it, got counsel about it, and ultimately opened up the doors of our church to this family, when every white church that these people were members of turned their back to them and said, sorry, we can't help you. We don't want anything to do with that. So that's why I say it's important that we still have, I guess, like not exclusively us, but things where we're leading the forefront of it, because we are each other's safe haven. And sometimes we're the only ones who move our own conversations and issues forward, because no one else will advocate for us.
Yeah. Now, this is my position on it right here. As far as exclusively Black, let's just take the HBCUs, let's take the African-American church. My position is, I don't have to be exclusively Black. I believe that we can be all inclusive and bring everyone in. But the key thing I don't want to lose is our mission and our essence, what we are all about. Because like I say, if someone wants to come in, we're not going to shift because of the dollar or all of this here. We're going to stand firm on what we believe and so forth. Because I believe that, you get different people in there, and so forth. Variety helps sometimes. But like I say, I just wouldn't want to lose all the identity, what we stand for, our belief, our mission, and so forth. But yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Just like the body of Christ, you talk about the church. I mean, you know, you know, I'm like what they say in New York, we accept all, you know, every type and that type of thing. But the key thing with the the church and the HBCUs, I don't want to lose what we really stand for. You know, I don't want to get that watered down. Don't lose that. But if you want to come and embrace this culture and learn and, you know, can see what we do and how we do it. But even with church and worship, hey, to me, now, you know, like I say, hey, open that, you know, the doors of church are open. So with that being said, you know, as long as it's led by God and the Spirit of God is preeminent and leading, and we're hearing the voice of God, and that man or woman is a man of God, or, you know, woman of God, I'm cool with that. I don't have to go to all black church or all that type of thing. You know, I do have my preference and so forth, but I just wouldn't say, hey, I got a black church and it's not, you know, it's not embracing all type. No, I wouldn't want that at all.
My concern, if I could add one more piece to that, is to why I spoke the way I did, because it's been a lot of trickery. You know, you go back in history, I think it was you, Brother Donnell, talking about the things we started out having our name on, or was that you, Austin? Someone else came in, got the patent for it, and now it's their product. You know, so if we keep on surrendering what we have as ours, you know, pretty soon we won't have much at all, because we came out, what happened to our 40 acres and a mule? That was promised, you know, but then that would have made too much wealth for us. We would have been too wealthy. We would have, because we're creators, right? So therefore we would have created income, and now that would have outdid the other source. So I like for us to have something that represents us and us only.
Okay. Daniel, did you have something you want to throw on this?
He's loaded.
I feel like I'm gonna be long-winded if I say it.
No,
So
knock it out, man. Knock it out. We conversate.
Man, I'm gonna try to condense what I'm trying to say, because pretty much everybody kind of hit on it. But every culture gets it except for us. Every culture gets it except for us. I'm gonna say that again. There's Chinatown, there's Mexican town, there's all these other cultures who create these epic centers for themselves in cities that is exclusive to their particular culture, and they do commerce in those particular areas, and they live within those communities, they build wealth within those communities, they thrive within those communities. But we're the only cultural group who we are talking about not necessarily focusing on our ethnicity and doing things, the black dollar, the black schools, the black, you know, grocery stores. Every time we talk about that, it seems like, how come we aren't the ones who are looking to integrate ourselves out? How come nobody else is focusing on that, but just us? Everybody else gets it, but we don't get it. I want to separate culture from religion or from belief, because I know sometimes we say, well, my identity is in Christ, and my identity is in Christ. I don't live through my blackness. I am black. I don't have to live through it. I am black. But my point basically is that people will gravitate to where they have identity. And so if I identify with an all black church, I'm going to go to the all black church. If I identify with a church that's multicultural, I'm going to identify with that church. I'm going to go to that church. I think where you worship is based on preference, and that's where I'm going to leave that. I don't think it has to do with God himself. I think it's just where you have a preference to go. It's like you have a preference to go where you want to eat. You don't make you go to these restaurants. You choose based on preference. It's still food places, but it's just based on your preference. But when it comes to cultural power inside of a city, I think we have to be intentional about that, because people are being intentional about breaking that down. You mentioned earlier about Greenwood. We were about our business. If you understand the history of Greenwood was actually created as a town where the United States wasn't even a part of it. It was actually still an Indian reservation that was acquired after a period of time. If you do your homework, you'll see there were several Black Wall Streets. African Americans just wanted to be left alone to thrive inside of their environment and grow. We were building our own city, towns, banks, school systems. We had basically everything. And the problem was that people who were not advancing were jealous and decided that we could not live better than them because how they perceived how. So we will never have a problem of advancing. We have a problem with people leaving us alone so that we can. That's our big problem. Our problem is that people don't want us to advance. Like Pastor Vance said, we're creative. We create wealth. If you were to pull every African American out of the United States and take them back to Africa, which they said they wanted us to do, what would the United States look like? You can't even see a United States without us. Where would their agricultural system be right now? What would be their culture? Everybody's appropriating Black culture, Black food, Black dance, Black music, you name it. And so my point basically being is that our problem is not necessarily identity. Our problem is just being left alone to become who we are authentically God-given grace to become. And that is our greatness of who we actually are.
And I'm not opposed to, like you mentioned the Chinatown and all that. If I think it's incumbent upon the African Americans to initiate that type of thing, that if they had the mindset to all get together, I'm all pro that, because like I say, I think back about the Negro Baseball League. They were thriving. Then when integration, Jackie came in, that disbanded that, and so forth. And like you say, hey, I'm familiar with the history of all that, how we were thriving and so forth. But back then in the early 20s and so forth, like you mentioned, Brother Daniel, they were jealous, because we were wealthy, we were thriving, all that, and they were hating. Long story short, plus you were dealing with all that real intense, even though we still experience that today, but it was just so blatant back then. Yeah, so yeah, but we've always had the ability and acumen to succeed and thrive. That's all within us, so I'm all for that, but I'm just to the point now, I just don't want us to just I mean, just exclude everyone. We can get it going, but if they want to bring in and do commerce with us and so forth, yeah, we'll allow them in and so forth. But if we can, maintain and own it pretty much ourselves, I'm not saying relinquish everything, even with the, like I mentioned, the historical Black colleges. We don't want to relinquish our identity and all that. And like you say with the churches, that's going to be a cultural preference thing. But I'm just not going to say because we are a church, there are some churches, I'm sure, that may not welcome you because of your color too, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, so I'm really in agreement with what you guys are saying, but I just don't want it to be where we're not embracing different people, but let's not lose our identity and our essence.
Truthfully, when have African Americans ever really not been inclusive of other races? We are one of the most inclusive people on the planet.
I agree.
I mean, it's like we're we are. That's all I'm going to say, is that we are one of the most inclusive people on the planet.
I agree with you.
And like even to your point, Danielle, even at HBCUs, right, where like we talk about like getting rid of them. I live in North Carolina now, which is the South. There's HBCUs all over the place, and I was just in Alabama, and Alabama State had a white guy on their on one of their billboards for an advertisement. And so it's just like, yes, we're a historically Black college and university, but yes, white people can come here, Asian people can come here. You look at I want to say it's Jackson State, and they have I think it's a Lebanese guy who's a drum major. You go to a lot of these, let's say PWIs, for example, and everybody in the band, most of the drum majors are going to be white. So to your point, Danielle, like we are, I would say, the most inclusive culture within America.
Like that. Because one thing that I've always noticed is, just like y'all have alluded to, we've always welcomed, you look at the trade, you go back thousands of years and you look at trade flowing out of Africa, trade flowing through the Middle East. So it always has been an inclusion aspect. And I have no problems actually with Black organizations. My problem has always just been the segregationist mindset. And that's the thing we just kind of need to stay away from. But I'm gonna get back to something you said, Danielle, real quick, and I'm gonna ask y'all this. Why can't we figure it out? Because we've seen examples in the past of the Black Wall Streets, of the success. And the thing we know the tactic. We know the tactic is either jealousy from outside or jealousy from within. And those outside using those within, processes of jealousy to tear things down. Since we know this is not new news, why can't we figure this out and thrive economically? Because we're the biggest consumers for the small populace that we are. Blacks are the biggest consumers in the US. So why can't something be figured out that, hey, y'all, screw the light bulb in, me show y'all the way. What's up with that?
I'm gonna say we did figure it out, and they killed all of your leaders who figured it out. I keep so you go back, like I said again, you go back to the 60s and you start looking at basically where the leaders of key movements, take the Black Panther Party for instance. They the Black Panther Party was actually another one of those inclusion organizations. They wanted to make the Black Panther Party seem as if it was only African American males and women, but they actually were the first organization to bring all ethnic groups together, all marginalized ethnic groups together in order to, and that was a sense of power. And so you had to break that, because that gives you a sense of control that they don't want you to have. And so I think our weakness is that we strive so much to have a leader instead of have leaders. We look to have one person that stands in front of us that we follow, instead of having a collective of leaders and that we move as a force. Because if you cut off one head, there goes the body. But if you have a multi-headed entity, and that's what they learned in Pan-Africanism, is that, well, we got to have more than one head. This thing doesn't stop just because of one person. If you take off one, that's the reason why they can't get rid of, some of the stuff is made up, but that's the reason why you can't get rid of some of the Al-Qaeda, cell groups, is because they understand the multi-headed dynamic of it. Is that one person basically is not, we're a collective. We all have the same mind. We all have the same mission and goal and focus. So I think as we reemerge and we start developing, these leader sets, and we start pimping out our pseudo leaders, because honestly, I mean, that's just me. I believe we killed all the leaders and then replaced them with pseudo leaders. And now these pseudo leaders basically just keep us pacified. So you mentioned Al Sharpton. I feel Al Sharpton is a pseudo leader. I think he's an opportunist. He pops up for camera ops, and he gets the crowd riled up, and then he just goes away. He doesn't do anything else. I feel Louis Farrakhan is a pseudo leader. He pops up, he says very eloquent in speech, and he gets people riled up, and he says some great stuff. But when it comes down time to when people needed to, who stepped forward when in the times of all of these murders? They spoke from their platforms in their own meetings, but who actually came forward to the forefront to say, we're going to sit down and talk to city officials, city leaders, government officials, in order to bring an end to this? I haven't seen any kind of, we got a black caucus, we got all this black stuff, but it's just for me, it's just filled with pseudo leaders.
And for me,
You're not wrong.
Yeah. For me, I think it's more of a fear dynamic. I think the leaders that could stand up in this present time, not that they're the younger ones just birthed in aren't going to come up to be leaders, which I think we're going to find some fine, outstanding young men coming up and in the process of doing that right now. But what we have before us now in this time and space that we're in, I think everyone's afraid, because they look at the past and it's a history repeating itself. So when history repeats itself, what's going to make it stop? Or a person think that it will stop? I may be the next one that's stepping up, trying to be a representative. I may be next, and I'm not willing to take that stance. But I think we're going to have a young man come up out of the mist and lead the country.
Let me throw this out there, since you mentioned that, Brother Fonz. If your heart is such that you're in a high position, or you're in a position of influence like that on a political stage, okay, but you're afraid to say what's right because you're afraid of what the consequences may be, you aren't qualified.
I
I'm gonna be
understand.
honest.
Yeah, I understand that point, but it's different from speaking from your frame of knowledge and where your stance is versus to being in that leadership position. That leadership position, I feel, takes on more responsibility, and it takes on more of It takes more of a person with character. But just to get up and say something about your opinion, anyone could go up and say that, and they'll look at it just as that is just his opinion, you know. But when you go center stage and you're standing representing half the nation, so to speak, you know, that's a different look, totally different. At least that's my feelings on it.
Yeah. And Jonathan, what you said, I think goes back to Danielle's point of pseudo leaders and not building a team of leaders, right? You look at churches, right? You get a guy or a husband and wife team who comes and joins the church, for example, and they stay at that church for 3-4 years and say, all right, I think it's time for us to start our own church. They're not doing it the way we do it. And then they go off and start their new church. It's because people aren't conditioned to build a team. And I think a lot of that is historic as well. Like, for example, you look at, say you take a slave plantation, for example, typically there was probably only 1 or 2 people that knew how to read and knew how to write. So when it came time to deliver a sermon on Sundays, when all the enslaved folks were together, there was only one person who could clearly communicate what the Bible was saying, what God was saying and everything. So there's just kind of like this historic condition of, all right, we're only going to let one of you be excellent. We want to find a token Black person and we're going to push that person. And so now that creates jealousy within, that creates turmoil within, it creates, oh, if he can do it, I can do it, or if she can do it, I can do it. And so there's just like this internal feuding that happens that was conditioned. And unfortunately, we haven't always figured out how to break that mold, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, because really when you think about what all y'all said, people are looking for what? A Messiah, a savior, a deliverer, somebody that'll bring them freedom. It's looking in the wrong places. But let's stick on leadership for a minute. Now, I get cultural representation in all areas. I'm all for that, because you need to be able to relate to those who you're over. However, just being Black doesn't make me qualified for every key position in leadership.
No, for sure.
So do you feel like sometimes we base our leadership choices, and particularly our voting issues, on color? Because we're happy to see our brother in a spot. So it's like, hey, we check all the boxes, but we don't check them out first.
I'm gonna go ahead and just say this and then get up off my soapbox. I want to say yes, and I think sometimes it's needed, because if you have an opportunity, how many opportunities will you have where there's a viable African-American or biracial African candidate in order to sit in that particular seat? It's not that often that in history that's even come around. And so I think it's like almost like one of those separation things. And I didn't vote for Obama, just so that just to let you guys know. But I'm saying that how often does that come around? But it needed to be seen. It needed to be felt. As a nation, it needed to be seen. It needed to be felt. Because when was the next time that was going to rotate around? They put Ms. Harris in front of the world as the first vice president, right?
Vice president, right?
They had her out there in the forefront all during the race. She seemed like she was running side by side, like Barack was running with
Biden.
Biden. I'm sorry, I forgot his name.
Yeah, that's saying something.
Right, with Biden. But my point basically is that after he got into office, she faded to Black. And that's a bad term to use, but
no pun intended.
Right, no pun.
I'm saying the same thing.
You didn't hear from her as much. She doesn't have the forefront camera anymore. You don't really hear. Matter of fact, you don't hear from her like you heard from Biden even when Obama was in office. You still felt like there was like this duo team running our nation when Obama was in office with Biden, but you don't feel that on this end. So that, to me, it just made it feel like that she was just put out there to say that, hey, we got a little African American female out there, and we check the box again. You know, so right. You know, so I feel like it is needed, but at the same time, as I'm using her as an example, I feel like we shouldn't be chasing the Black vote at the same time. I feel like African Americans need to be represented on both sides of the party ticket. I mean, because I think that's why African Americans always feel jilted when the Democrats don't win, because they feel like that was their best hope. Well, you shouldn't have put all your eggs, as they say, in one basket. You should vote. You should vote with a mixed ticket. You should vote based on who has your best interest, you know, at heart, and use your vote more strategically instead of just having a Black vote. And that's what they want us to do. They just want us to be ignorant and just say, because we say that we got you, as your boy basically said to us, he was like, you know, what did Biden have the nerve to say to Black people when it came to voting for him?
If you don't vote for me, you're not Black. You did, yeah.
And I get off my soapbox.
Go and throw some water on that fire, somebody.
I don't have a whole lot.
Throw some coals on it.
I don't get up into those type of debates much, but all I would say is you vote for, you know, who you feel is going to do the right, and you know, and irregardless of the particular race. That would be my position on it. Who you feel is going to do best, and you know, vote as Christians, we vote according to however God is leading you. And I'm gonna leave it like that, because I don't get into these type of things much. So let's say on, gentlemen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, definitely do your research, but like to Danielle's point, like the representation is powerful. And I mean, you look at my grandmother, she is 89 years old, and probably in her lifetime, she never imagined that she would see a person who was a Black descendant who would be a vice president, or a Black person who would be a president of the United States. So whether you agree with them politically or not, I think the representation within itself is powerful. And I think it did give a lot of hope to a lot of people that they thought they would never see. I mean, that's like when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series after being around for 108 years. There's some people who are 100 years old that probably never thought that they would live to see that day. But the day that it did happen and they were breathing is a lot of inspiration to a lot of people. And I think it's important to have advancements like that.
Yeah, you look at Joe Louis when he beat, you know, like throughout history, when you have an oppressed people, they're always looking at those moments in history where a person was victorious over an oppressor. And so I just think that those moments are just important.
That's a good example of Black excellence right there. Not all the rest of that stuff. Brother Fon, what you got to add on that?
I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna be church mouse today. Not today, but just on that topic. I'm gonna be the church mouse.
Okay. I'm just gonna throw this on it. Bible says the devil comes as an angel of light. So devil comes as something attractive to you. He comes as something familiar to you. So I'm not knocking, but I just want people to really think about things. If I want to taint your lifestyle in a negative fashion, if I want to slip some things by you, I'm going to bring it to you in your favorite sippy cup. I'm going to give it to you in a way that you're going to accept it. And you're going to take it and you're going to drink the poison, not realizing that I've given you that. And I realize I want to kill you because I gave it to you in your familiar package. So I just want, just do your research, do your homework, look up bios, think. That's all I'm asking people. Think. But let's wrap this conversation up with one point. All right. Because the Bible doesn't identify with race. You don't hear about that. Not in the Bible. So for those of you who haven't read it, get in the Bible. I think you'll be surprised. It bases culture on nationalities. Now, have we made a demigod out of Black culture? Have we put being Black above serving God? What y'all think? I got a lot to say on. I mean, I get a chance to say it, but y'all tell me what y'all think.
You may want to go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
I would say yes. You know, I'm gonna say yes because that's one thing that I see, and the reason why I say yes is I look at the hardness of our heart in a lot of ways. Now I understand being scarred. People think, all right, I'm just gonna say this. People think being light-skinned black, you got it easier. No, it don't make a difference at all. Actually, it makes it harder because darker skinned blacks don't always like you, and white folks don't know where you stand either. But all I'm gonna say on that is if you look at it from a forgiveness standpoint, that empowers you. So we hold on to our bitterness, and I'm not denying anything happened. But at the same time, us holding on to that bitterness and making that the first thing that we wear, that's actually holding us back. That's a weight. Forgiveness is power because actually that's our power to give out. So I think once we actually look at it from that standpoint, like, you know what? Yeah, this happened, but don't nobody owe me anything. Let me get my mind right. Let me see actually the purpose that God may have for me in this jacked up situation. I think that's when things will start to shift. But I think it's coming from a forgiveness standpoint first. And it's not anything that we have to do on a national stage. I think it's just in each individual's heart. Hey, look, I ain't gonna let what happened in the past hold me back. I'm gonna look forward and I'm gonna ask God to help me. That's all I got to say on it.
Can you give me an example? You may have just said it and then I may have missed it. What is an example of us making our race a god? Can you give me an example? Maybe you stated one and I just missed it. I got the piece about forgiveness. I know all about that.
I would say some church denominations. I think they put being black above the reason why they're there. I could say that about certain groups. I've seen that, and I'm not dismissing. I'm not knocking. I think sometimes just really a lack of is ignorance. And it's just a lack of really knowing. But at the same time, I've seen that in fraternities. You could take anything that you think is very important and really put that above and beyond what really is the most important. So.
Okay.
Restate your question again. I just want to make sure that I'm
okay. I'll just ask, and have Black people made a demigod or an idol out of our culture? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. We're very familiar with idols.
I'm not sure, truthfully. Maybe there are some individual groups, maybe there's some individual people who have, because like I say, I'm this, I'm Black, whatever. I don't know. I really can't answer that. There's a strong possibility that there are many groups that may have, but right now, I'm not at the point to state any particular people or groups, but I'm sure that's a strong possibility that could be occurring.
Well, for me, I would like to think that that's not taking place, because as generations have come and gone, we have become more intelligent in knowing that we don't worship idols. And a race, if you're trying to portray a race as being an idol, that in itself would be a wrong balance for us. And I don't think that we're going backwards in that sense. I think we're moving forward with respect to knowing who's God and who's not God. And it's not, I think someone may have said it, it's not a colored God. God is God.
Yeah. Well,
I kind of feel like with anything, there are groups of people who can be too extreme with it. I mean, I might be radical saying this, but like even within the Christian world, there are people that have made the term Christian an idol versus like actually worshiping God. Like that has become the thing to say I'm Christian, even though you don't walk the walk, you don't talk the talk. There are people that have made money their idols. There are people that have made their material possessions their idols. So I feel like pretty much with anything that you can categorize, there's gonna be a subgroup of people who makes that thing their identity. And I guess this is one of the things that's sometimes frustrating, if you will, about Blackness is the issue is never brought to the forefront until Blackness is attached to it, right? You look at critical, let's say we're talking about critical race theory, and critical race theory was about teaching the truth about the Holocaust. Would we get as much pushback about critical race theory? I would go on to say probably not, because it's like, oh, we have to talk about what happened in the Holocaust. We have to talk about how it affected a certain group of people. Whereas because we're attaching Blackness to it, it's heavily scrutinized. And so I think sometimes the scrutiny of Blackness is what makes it appear to be an idol, where it's just like, no, like, I'm Black, I'm proud. We've been ostracized in this world, and I just want to make people aware of the good things that have happened to us, as well as the bad things that have happened to us. So I don't know, like I said, I think because there's, you attach Blackness to it, then it becomes more ostracized than anything else.
Yeah, my thing is that it's just knowing the difference between pride and being proud. They're not the same thing. And I think sometimes we act like those words are synonymous. And so when we talk about how proud I am about who I am and what I or my people have accomplished, it automatically sounds like I'm creating an idol of pride. And so my thing is that, as everybody's already stated, it's impossible for you to say that somebody hasn't, or some group hasn't made it an idol. Okay, I mean, if you're human, you're gonna make anything that you think you want to worship basically become that thing. You know, children of Israel were in the middle of the wilderness, they built a whole calf and just worshiped it, you know what I'm saying? Because Moses was taking too long. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? But my point basically is that, yeah, that stuff is going to happen. But I think in totality, though, I think we just want to always just weigh between the difference between me being proud or me walking in pride, because I think in that basically that allows us to weigh ourselves, weigh our our endeavors, weigh what we do, what we don't do, you know, and I'm gonna leave it like that.
Oh, that was a good ending take on that. I like that.
That's what I was trying to say, but it ain't come out that smooth.
Hey, we're gonna be finishing each other's sentences in a minute. No, that was good, because see, that's one thing. There's always a balance, and it is never knocking who you are, because every culture in the world has an identity. So the thing is, you identify somewhere. But it's just really realizing the hierarchy that, hey, I am who I am, but I'm still under God. So that should always matter first. That's the main thing. But I like this conversation, because we really kind of hit on something that's real. And I don't even know if people really talk about this, but I'm glad we did. So viewing audience, share this conversation, like the conversation, and definitely subscribe to the Man Code, because somebody in your world, they thinking about it, they need to talk about it, it needs to get out, and this needs to be the catalyst for it. So we want to thank you for joining us today. And until the next time we chop it up, peace out and keep the Man Code.
Right on.
Right, peace.